Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope everyone's arriving okay today. We're still missing a esteemed panelist, Alex from zkSync, but we'll get started. Today we have some exciting projects and founders here. Everyone here is in a different building and token lifecycle, I would say, right? But we all have been in this space for quite some time. So maybe to start off, Sandeep, you guys just released AgLayer very recently, but it's been since January, so it's been quite some time. Share a little about that, and also kind of where have you been up to from there?
The aggregation piece, like
yes.
So, what we are seeing, especially in the Ethereum world, and I think all of us like building in the Ethereum space share the same kind of thought process that how this like trustless internet, I call it Web3, you call it Web3 or trustless internet, how this trustless internet scales to the level of like the trustful internet that is today, right? How Web3 scales to the level of Web2. And I think like most of us believe that we are going to see the way we have application servers on the cloud, you have application servers, mobile app servers on the cloud, people are going to have these app chains for individual applications. And it will, like my personal thesis is that eventually every single app, whether you are a Uniswap or a Aave or anything, you will have your own chain. People will say that you don't have composability. If everybody has their own chain, the liquidity is fragmented, you don't have the composability, smart contracts can't compose with each other. And so yes, that's a fragmentation, that's an issue, and that's like aggregation layer is an answer to that. So again, the thesis is that there are going to be hundreds of thousands and over time millions of chains, the way you have millions of application servers today, but they are all aggregated together via some protocol, whether it's Polygon's protocol or something else. That's why we call it aggregation. We call it aggregation thesis. A lot of projects are already building on the aggregation thesis. And the way you guys hear modular today, in 6 to 8 months, maybe 12 months, you're going to hear that much about aggregation. It's going to be so much more about aggregation. And so all of these chains, even though they are fragmented, but they will feel like a single chain to the user in terms of the user experience and in terms of the liquidity moving around. And that's the thesis of aggregation layer, that you have infinitely scaling internet, and that's the goal of Polygon. Like, we don't care any middle stage, care about any middle stage, like having 10,000 transactions, 50,000 transactions, we don't care about that. We want to build a platform which has million TPS, 100 million TPS, ever increasing TPS basically. But to the end user, so how it is done is it is done with multiple thousands of these, hundreds of thousands of these chains being built, but they all to the end user feel like one single chain. The way we feel internet today is one single internet. We just connect and we use the apps that we want looking to use. That's aggregation.
Yeah, I love to dig a little deeper into that, but I love to start with Sandy also to talk about Scroll. Scroll's launched on mainnet since last year. I love to learn about what you guys been up to and your focus there.
Yeah, we launched mainnet about 6 or 7 months ago. And what's been really interesting is about kind of watching the stability and also the ecosystem development along with technical maturity kind of reaching a wider audience. Like, I think one of the insights from last year is that like research innovation has its own timing. I think there was a lot of ZK research that happened like in the world like at a certain time, and certain projects capture that opportunity. And then there's like market timing, and then there's also technical product maturity timing, and then there's also user awareness timing, and then there's also timing for developers to understand these infrastructure tools in order to build something new kind of timing. Each of these timing in aggregation plus like the crazy crypto cycle timing has really interesting kind of chemical impacts on how the ecosystem evolves. So I think it's been an interesting journey watching different developers in the ecosystem evolve and how the technical the tech stack evolved over the last couple of years, and I think we will see a lot of I'm hoping the industry, the dev, like learning about the infrastructure maturity process is going to accelerate over the next year, and then we're going to see some very notable applications that could only exist on zk.
So what's the most kind of top of mind timing for you, as you were referencing multiple different kinds of timing currently for Scroll?
Yeah, so for Scroll, one of it is about how, at what point are we confident about the stability and security of our chain. Obviously, the longer time it runs without incidents, the more confidence we build around, like, you know, and right now we're at a stage where we're confident enough to step up on our marketing and go-to-market efforts. So last couple of months has given us a lot of confidence around like the compatibility aspect and the liveness aspect and how many users we can kind of cater for. And using the city analogy, it's like it's a new city, Scroll's a new city, but it's got very robust infrastructure. It's got plumbing, it's got everything, and even when the flood comes, everything's still held together. And so now we're ready to
Literally.
see the cloud a little bit and see what happens.
So Rene, Celo has been exploring the L2 kind of journey for quite some time. You announced that you will be building on top of L2 since last year. What's the journey been like, and what should we be expecting? Are you guys going to be building your own L2? I'm curious.
Yeah, so on Monday actually is our 4-year mainnet anniversary. And one thing that really hasn't changed is the focus on solving real-world problems, right? So we started with some pretty out there ideas, which now in 2024 are actually finally possible at really kind of mass adoption scale. And some of the features that I think were, for the longest time, I think, preventing really mass adoption of kind of Web3 enabling some of these kind of use cases, like low fees, fast settlement, right? The ability to use the stuff easily on mobile phones from a UX, UI perspective. Just recently, like last few months, we've had USDC and USDT deployed on Celo, and users can use us as gas currencies, right? So I can send someone 5 USDT, and they can, without having to have Celo or ETH or some other token, simply send that on to a friend, right? Those are some small tweaks that are really kind of totally creating a very different user experience that I think makes this year really ready for seeing a lot more people coming in, not just to buy an NFT or a meme coin, but actually for this to become the fabric of their kind of financial life and ultimately economic life when it comes to not just building financial wealth, but actually using it as a way to get paid. And when tying that back to the L2 path, right, it's for us what's been really exciting is to kind of say, okay, long term, with Ethereum scaling and a lot of smart teams, some of them on the stage, right, working towards this kind of shared vision, it's very clear that that's kind of a winning architecture, and it's going to bring long-term benefits even for a chain like Celo. And so we were the first the first L1 that I think remember, that said, okay, we want to be in L2, and we're going to make that transition. A lot has happened since, a lot of new innovations, and we've been sort of making sure that we really understand what are the different trade-offs of each of the different approaches to ultimately optimize for maximum Ethereum alignment and long-term resilience, right? Because we have active users on the on the chain. There's 2 million people using Opera's MiniPay wallet across Africa, right? We don't want to mess with that, right? We want to make sure that this transition can bring additional benefits to everyone building and using Celo. But really, from a user perspective, that shouldn't even be something that a user has to think about, right? So it's kind of making sure that that transition also can be seamless. Yeah, to answer your question more precisely, we've been pretty transparent, sharing progress on our forum, and the last sort of update from the core team at C-Labs was that by the end of this month, there's going to be some updates. So yeah, definitely for folks to stay tuned on how that's progressing.
Yeah, following up with that, we're very excited and looking forward to the end of the year, end of the month announcement. Looking, out to 5 years, Celo looks back and look at the decision of what they chose as their L2 partner. I'm curious, how would you know that you're successful? Or how would you measure that you chose the right partner? And I'd love to hear from you, and also how you, as two L2 providers, to kind of think about that when you're talking to partners.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think this resilience element is very important, right? Ultimately, I think there's many really great approaches, right? But you don't want to go down a path that is going to kind of end up in a dead end, right? For your ecosystem, right? So you're really optimizing for whatever you're choosing to be a path that can be sort of long-term viable, right? And not create a situation that you are, that's going to create some technical debt or other debt, right? And so that's kind of back to the Ethereum alignment, right? Which we ourselves experienced, right? Early on, we actually, Celo started with a wallet that we built on top of Ethereum, and that at the time, proof of work Ethereum, right? Like everything, it didn't make sense for like micropayments or applications we were excited about. So we forked Geth and made a couple changes, which ended up being things that required a lot more work, kind of in terms of maintaining that compatibility. And with the recent Gingerbread hard fork in September as the first step to this L2 transition, we actually took some of those away, right, to enable that kind of clearer path to the L2. So in some ways, that's an important factor and something that we've been looking at very carefully in this process. Like, how do we balance some cool innovations and stuff that we certainly see in the future for the broader ecosystem, but also for us having something that gets us ideally to a launch sooner than later with a kind of proven approach that doesn't create sort of debt that we may not even understand right now.
Sandy, you have thoughts?
Yeah. When I think about the L2 space, someone who's looking at it from a very, very far away looks at a bunch of L2s. But for someone who's very in the space, I see all the L2s as having very, very different DNA and very different missions. So even though there are a number of L2s, there's only, like, Celo is the only one that is like very focused on the developing world in terms of its mission and serving, like, customers in Africa, and having that real world mindset is just very unique, and it comes from a place of like, this is where we want to be. And each team kind of has its own flavor and its own mission. And there are teams that cares about building fun things, and there are teams that cares about liquidity, and there are teams that cares about like being fast and being cutting edge tech and so on and so forth. Everyone has its own like standard of success, and it wants to go to a different place. So I think one observation is that I've not seen any general purpose L2 builders for the last year. So I think Polygon is a very technical-oriented, like general-purpose L2 builder for zkEVM, and so are we. But I've not seen any serious newcomers for quite a while. But there are multiple teams coming into the space, all have different missions, and they all have different things they want to achieve. So I see a future where the tech providers will become like a cluster, like a number of different standards that providers, like, and then different go-to-market teams and different founders with different missions will try and take bits and pieces of different standards or pick different kind of things. And I think the picture of success is one where all the, like every L2 will find its niche and find its own kind of technology provider in a way that is sustainable for its own growth, where they're in control of their own governance. And I think success also means you need to be in control of your own keys. You need to have like a sovereign setup and be able to kind of determine your own future in this kind of like in a technical Lego where you can piece things together. So that's the way I see this.
Yeah, Sandeep, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thought from Sandy, that the layer 2s will differentiate based on the culture, what they are, or their missions. I was actually going to answer that their success will not be dependent on which layer 2s they choose. It will be defined by how they do their go-to-market and everything, because all the layer 2 technologies are actually approaching a commodity commoditization phase,
Yep.
right? Everything, all the technology, all the teams, like, I mean, Polygon has been like, on the ZK side, like doing a lot of stuff and all that. But everything is open source, approaches are open source. A lot of other projects are also like, picking up those approach. And what I've seen is that on the ZK technology, like it's a matter of like, maybe 12 months, everybody will be at the same pace, right? And so differentiation based on the technology will not be that well. That's why I'm saying like, maybe Sandy is, bringing up this, like, it will be dependent on mission and culture, probably that. But I've also seen, looking at the ecosystems, like, Polygon has had a very big ecosystem for last like 4 or 5 years. And what I've seen is that the founders or the projects which are dependent on, let's say, Polygon for providing help and for their success are generally not that successful. The projects which are successful, we don't even know about them, right? Like they're building on Polygon. Like the founders, they figure out their own path and do their own stuff. So that's why, like, I think even now I'm seeing like the success of the partners who are on a particular L2, barring, let's say, one or two, like, let's say, Base for Optimism, like, there's a very close partnership over there. But apart from that, like, I'm seeing like whatever success those projects have, it's dependent on their own, like how they do like a general startup. For an L2, I think technology-wise, everything will be commoditized. Maybe the culture and mission and DNA would be good.
I have one more thing, and which is like, we've all been through the last cycle, right? And back then, it was like, this would have been a panel about like, L1 wars and like what's happening, right? And back then it was much more of like, as a builder, right, whatever L1 you picked, could determine your fate, right? If you bet on an L1 that's not going to be around in 2-3 years, right? That could be kind of, that could be the end for your project, right? Unless you jump off early enough. Now with, I think, the opportunity with kind of L2s and sort of especially Ethereum L2s, right? And kind of looking at sort of this shared roadmap of, really scaling Ethereum, that's actually really a great thing happening for developers, right? Because whatever you're building, right, you can start somewhere, but whether you're building, say you're building a wallet or a dApp, right, you end up tapping into not just the brain trust, but also from whether it's liquidity, right, or whether it's other applications or components that you need. You're not as sort of siloed as you were, 3-4 years ago when you would have to make this decision. So I think net, this is really a positive. And ultimately, I think there's this kind of initial phase of, some fragmentation just based on people trying different approaches to get to the goal. But long term, I do really see that kind of unified, kind of broader ecosystem, right, where ultimately who wins are the developers and with that, their users, right, of the products they're building. And so from a Celo perspective, I see us hopefully just playing a role accelerating that, even by with what we've been learning, right, kind of sharing that. I mean, the reason we're doing that is not to like, like, I don't know, like, we're not hoping to get much input from it, but we feel like there's going to be others that are going to look at that, right, and it's going to just help move everyone forward that's making a similar decision or wants to just get smart on everything that's happening.
Damn it, like looking at or hearing Rene's answer, that should have been my answer. Like, that I should have shielded the egg layer for that, like, because, but he's saying like maybe choice of the right L2 will be defined by how these shareable, things like liquidity and developers and all that, which ecosystem provides a more fluid system so that they can benefit from whatever is happening on the whole ecosystem. So that's why probably aggregation layer, I should have shielded more on that. Thanks, Rene.
By the way, welcome Alex from zkSync. I think following up that point, Sandeep, what are the kind of top two, and you talk about liquidity as one of the top priorities that projects are looking for. I think originally coming into this panel, I really had a lot of concerns for Ethereum, especially given how many L2s we have in the space versus what you've seen in Solana, for example. I mean, there will be maybe L2s, and there'll probably be other kind of modularity built on Solana as well. But the point here for Ethereum is that we have a lot of different L2s running in parallel trajectories. And the question for me, and the concern for me was how do we actually eventually build a unified experience for the individual, the end user and developer, whatever have you. And I think now from what Rene was saying, it felt like, restaking Choice security is actually one example of a unified experience that we're trying to provide for the end user, right? And I'm curious, do you think that we have become more unified as a space on Ethereum and for Ethereum? Or do you think there are more things that we can do to push further along this line?
I think we like the user experience, if it's better, if it's more unified and better, that's obviously that we need. But I don't think like we should be unified in all our approaches and everything. That's not, the divergent approaches and having multiple of these layer 2s doing different kind of technology and experimenting on it is a feature, it's not a bug. If you, like, I highly recommend everyone to read this on Wikipedia, Protocol Wars, and see how internet was developed.
Yeah.
Like internet was not developed like somebody just came up and said that, okay, this is TCP/IP and this is the final standard. Like there were multiple competing standards, then it became like one main standard, and then on top of that, multiple competing standards. Eventually one or two like survived, or few of them survived in different domains, different protocols, I'm saying.
Yep.
So, that's a feature I'm not worried about. Like, in crypto, we tend to be extremely short term because these markets move, the prices move in the matter of 6 months. These protocols are developed on a scale of like 10 to 15 years, 20 years, right? And, I'm absolutely not worried about Ethereum's, future in that sense. I am like only thinking these different approaches. At the end now, like everyone in our Ethereum ecosystem, we all now recognize that, okay, user experience is becoming probably a little bit more fragmented.
Yep.
Everybody is now trying to work in, and try to find like compatibilities for the end users.
Yep.
And you will see like maybe in 12, 18 months, that will not be a problem. Something else will be a problem.
Yep.
And we'll keep solving those problems.
For sure.
Scale was a problem. Now scale is no longer a problem. Block space is no longer a problem. Now UX is a problem. We will solve it in 12, 18 months. Then something else. And eventually this becomes the trustless internet.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Andy or Alex?
I think UX problem is becoming prominent, but for certain L2 experimentations that focuses more on liquidity, on yield aggregation, this is slightly kind of less urgent. But there's an increasing number of people who thinks onboarding new users and getting net new kind of users onto the Ethereum ecosystem is becoming like a critical issue.
Yep.
And then the fragmentation of various standards is becoming like a blocker. And so I think when we issued our blog about like a key store solution to somewhat resolve the onboarding problem, so many different teams reached out to collaborate. And I'm sure there'll be more experimentation and collaboration along this way where, chains can have their different stacks and different like parts of the stack, but the user experience needs to be more simplified. And then there needs to be a way where a net new user can find their footing within the ecosystem. So we're making a lot of pushes on that front.
Yeah, Alex.
I think that today our problem is not so much the fragmentation of user experience as the lack of great user experience in the first place. This is the problem we should be all solving, and I think the great thing about Ethereum is this permissionless innovation that we are, like, the liquidity is connected between all the L2s on Ethereum, even if it's not native, even if it's not convenient for the users. It's convenient for the actors behind the scenes, for the arbitrageurs, for whoever liquidity providers who move liquidity, and so it gives us a lot of space to experiment and come up with user experience, which is great, and then something will crystallize that has capability to onboard the next 1 billion users, and I'm pretty sure it will quickly propagate throughout the entire space.
Yeah, Alex, while I have you there, I had everyone kind of share a bit of an update of their project. I'd love to hear more about zkSync and what you guys have been up to.
Sure. So, at zkSync, we are in the space of scaling Ethereum with zero-knowledge proofs. I'm sure you discussed it before me, so like we all understand that zero-knowledge proofs is ZK is the end game for scaling, because it's the only way to scale verifiable computation in a way that does not compromise on the important properties of the protocols. And we've been working on this for 6 years now. We're very mission-driven, very focused on preserving the original values there with technology, and we're very excited about the growth of the ecosystem right now. Like we have, like I don't know if we spoke about that, but it's quite obvious that the scaling, that Ethereum is not a single chain, or it's not going to be a collection of a few chains. It's going to be many, potentially thousands of different chains that are all interconnected, and we see some ecosystems emerging that have this property, and zkSync is one of them, and we have a number of really interesting zk chains launching in this ecosystem recently. So this is one thing I'm really excited about, and the other thing is decentralization of the protocol and thinking about the future where the community takes over and the protocol is standing on its own with ultimate resilience that comes with this community layer.
So I want, yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick reaction to what you said before on the challenge being the UX and UI. I think you're right on that. I think it does feel like we kind of have these waves where we have like massive infrastructure innovation, right, and then sort of application innovation kind of comes as a result of that, and then the app developers realize, oh shit, there's a bunch of stuff that's still not working, and so that triggers the next wave of innovation. I think Chris Dixon wrote a post about this a while back, but I think this is kind of very true right now, right? With like a lot of the infrastructure that's been built in these past few years now is like an amazing point in time to build applications again, right? And like, I hope everyone in this room is like, or most people in this room are looking at this, right? There's so much that's possible, which sometimes like on crypto Twitter is like, oh yeah, but we still can't do this because like fees are too high, or like there's this, like problem of moving assets, or liquidity is not there. But like, actually like there are technical solutions to most of those critiques now, and it really shouldn't be an excuse anymore to not build amazing apps, right? And so I'd love to see the number of people that build applications like 10x in this cycle. And hopefully it's not everybody just kind of doing meme coins, but actually building great applications. Because that's really, I think, we are at the point where there's so much more that can be done. And for regular users, right, there are experiences that I'm seeing in our ecosystem, whether that's MiniPay I mentioned, or whether that's things like, what Talent Protocol is doing and others, where the experience is very close to a Web 2 experience, right? So someone using like, I don't know, like WhatsApp on their phone, or TikTok, or like a Web 3 app, it's not as kind of different as it used to be a few years ago, where you're like, oh yeah, for this you kind of like have to have your kind of Web 3 friends spend the weekend with you and get you set up. But no, the stuff now is much more accessible, but we don't have like, just tons of people experimenting and trying to build cool stuff, right? Like even at hackathons, people are still building some of the same stuff they were trying to build 3-4 years ago. So I'm really hoping for like a wave of applications. Anyway, a little rant.
I agree, and I think right now I'm currently seeing more folks building L2s than applications. And I like to see that change. Maybe it's just from my perspective. I think also in addition, I'm seeing also a lot of projects, even the existing L2 space, right? Like existing, OGs at this point. Some folks are now, proposing the launch of L3s, and then some folks are even building into Bitcoin, right? Like we're seeing a gamut of like what everyone's building towards to acquire users. And I think there's a diversity and variation in the opinion of how do we get to the end user. I know Polygon just launched the OKX chain with OKX, right, which is very exciting. I'd love to just get your thoughts on, the general space of what L2s are building for, and like, these peers who are building in different directions. Yeah, if that makes sense.
So, I didn't get the question.
Yeah. I think my primary question is like, what do you think about the folks building like into L3s, right? What do you think about L3s? What do you think about like even L2s existing in Ethereum building for a Bitcoin? Like
L2's building on Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Like taking a little bit step back from that, like, this is basically the market. Whenever we see these short-term trends in the market, I'm not saying Bitcoin L2s are a short-term, but first, like I'm saying, all of these short-term trends are basically the markets, because like Sandeep, articulated beautifully that this speculation and markets run much faster than the product cycles.
Yeah.
So products take time to catch up, like layer 2s take time to catch up. And right now when you say like, you have more layer 2 chains than the applications right now, right? It is the reason is that because like, having an L2 chain brings speculation to your coin or token and all that. You see, like before that we had a meme coin.
Like having the L2
session,
label
like,
brings.
it's all Bitcoin L2s also. It started with like Bitcoin L2s as a narrative that
Yeah.
Bitcoin L2s are going to be the big, and some coins started doing well, and then everybody wants to launch Bitcoin L2s because they want people to speculate on them. But the actual Bitcoin L2 development, that is going to take time. There
Yeah.
are some legit, like now at least I know 2-3 legit projects who are doing or who are trying to scale Bitcoin, where there is like, legit methodology using like, especially where the zk has, reached
Yep.
now,
Yep.
having snark proofs and having some sort of like optimistic games on Bitcoin script. You can have some sort of fair enough guarantees and an optimistic roll-up kind of situation on Bitcoin. And because it will bring a lot of speculation, people will build it. And good part of the speculation is a lot of money comes in, a lot of brain power comes in into this, talent comes in, and then eventually you get good things coming out. So that's the same thing with the layer 2s, like Ethereum layer 2s. Like again, I want to say that the market cycles are running too fast, and everyone is like last 6 months. The markets, everything is all L1s are going up, and Ethereum ecosystem is not going that much up. Ethereum is not going up. Everybody's like, oh, Ethereum has this problem, that problem. But I think like, those are features, not bugs. Like, as Alex also said, the biggest power of Ethereum's ecosystem is this permissionless innovation. That's why projects like us, like projects like, Scroll, zkSync, and now even Celo, who are multi-billion, Celo is a multi-billion-dollar protocol. And then they are now moving to the layer 2 because they think that they can build and innovate over there and build value for their communities also, right? This is probably less possible in many other ecosystems, and it is a feature. Don't believe these market cycles, layer 2 innovation and all these problems that we have, that UI, UX and all that. Like people don't even realize like the kind of products that are being built to solve UX issues on the layer 2s, like things like from the open authentication, like Privy, PWAs, all those things people are working on, multiple things like that, gasless transactions and so many other things. These problems will be solved eventually. So yeah, I am super bullish on L2s, as you can see.
Yeah. Sandy, any thoughts on L3s? I guess Bitcoin L2s even, but I think just curious on
L3s?
the space as well.
Yeah, I think most people building on L3s need to understand their user needs to strictly come from the L2. So there is a UX trade-off in being an L3 as opposed to a parallel instance of an L2. But on the other hand, I think we're hoping to see more ambitious experimentation with how the L3 setup could benefit the end user experience. Like L3s that focuses on very, very specific features, whether it's like optimizing for speed or throughput or optimizing for like usability. We would love to see more of that. I think so far, L3 has been like a very interesting narrative, and it's good for kind of differentiating your application, which would otherwise exist very well as just an app or just as another L2. But I think I think those teams are working on ambitious and differentiated L3 designs are coming.
I hear you. Any thoughts, Rene, Alex?
I'll leave my time to Alex.
The question is about L3s versus L2s, and
Sorry?
it's about L3s and L2s, right?
Yeah, just your thoughts if you have any.
Yeah, I think that the distinctions are getting like very technical, where we should not be like, I mean, from the perspective of developers and users, at least the way it's architected in the zkSync ecosystem, it does not really matter which, like, how you settle your proofs or how you settle your state together and what order. Ultimately, there are just sovereign chains that are fully interoperable with each other. It doesn't really matter if you're L2, L3, or L4. The notion doesn't exist in our ecosystem. And so like, if you have to explain why you are L2 or L3, then probably we need to work a little better on abstracting the interfaces and abstracting the user experience. The users should not care. They should and we need to cooperate on the standards, on the addressation and like interop functionality, so that for the users, they just like do one click and transaction happens between any point of the ecosystem with any other point. So that's our perspective.
Yeah, I think Sandeep related to that before, that we might get there in terms of the unified user experience in 6 to 12 months. Do you think that's the case for like all of Ethereum?
Yeah, but like L3s, I just missed that answer. That L3, I think like all the L3s currently, they are mostly, Sandy said, like for differentiation. I would say differentiation so that they can invite more speculation. Otherwise, I don't see much use of L3s, especially when these aggregation technologies and these things are coming in, where your proving cost and everything is going to get amortized anyways.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely like, you don't really have a benefit of having a layer 3. Like layer 2s launching their more on their layer 3s to expand their block space, so that they want to keep the users in their value accrual, value ecosystem, probably. But otherwise, for me, like I've not seen many compelling real reasons for being an L3.
Yeah, I think we're out of time, but let's give it a round of applause for our awesome guests. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you. Okay.